Wow, I feel like Bill Nye. Hi, welcome back to Green Thumb. My name is Maryah Greene and I'm the plant doctor and stylist. And this is the show where I show you how to add the right green to your space. Today, we're gonna dive in a little deeper and take a look at the topic of watering and the proper way to water each and every one of your houseplants. Watering is one of the most confusing topics out there. And don't worry, I also had the same issues when I started taking care of my first houseplants. But today, we're gonna cover everything you need to know about how to properly water them. There are a couple things you wanna keep in mind when you're trying to decide how much and how often to water your houseplants. The main factors are the size of the plant, the type of plant, whether or not the pot has drainage or no drainage, and how much light it's getting. Now, lighting is a really important factor to consider for multiple reasons. Lighting and watering go hand in hand, and how much water your plant receives will really be determined on how much light the plant's receiving. Your plant is gonna absorb a ton of water each time you water it, but some of that water will also evaporate into the air. And the light will dictate how quickly that happens. So plants that are getting more light might need water more often. However, there are a couple things that dictate whether or not that's exactly true. Whether or not the plant is in a pot with drainage and the type of plant that it is. A really common misconception about watering is how often to water your plant as opposed to how much. And that's where the drainage hole comes into play. Overwatering is often thought of as giving your plant way too much water, when in reality, it's actually how often you're watering your plant, and sticking to a schedule is key. Now, when it comes to the type of plant, you want to do your best to recreate its original environment. And so if you have something like a tropical that likes to stay fairly moist and allow the soil to dry out every now and then, you might have to water it every 7 to 10 days. Whereas if you have a cacti or succulent, you might be watering it every 2 to 3 weeks. But again, this is based on lighting in its original environment. So for tropical plants, you want to keep in mind that they like to dry out in between waterings. So just because the top of the soil is dry doesn't mean that underneath is time for water. Whereas with cacti and succulents, you might only need to water them once every 3 to 4 weeks. But again, that's based on the lighting. There are a couple ways to determine what your plant needs and the best care schedule for it. You can look it up online, or you can ask the nursery or plant shop owner, because odds are they definitely know how to take care of the plants that they just sold you. A really common question that I get all of the time is, what the heck is the drainage hole and do you even need it? Now, the drainage hole is essential in making sure that you don't overwater your plant. On watering day, one of the things that you can do is take all of your pots with holes at the bottom, put them in the sink, and you can water all of your plants together so any excess water can drain out the bottom. It's pretty common that the really nice pots just don't have a hole at the bottom, and so often I get the question, can I still use this pot? Absolutely. You just want to line the bottom of it with aeration or drainage stones to prevent root rot. Now, larger plants stay moist for a longer period of time, and that's mostly because they have more soil and it locks in moisture for a longer period of time. So a plant that's in a 20-inch pot may only need water once every 3 to 4 weeks, whereas that same exact plant in a 6-inch pot might need water every 1 to 2 weeks. So that's where the size of your plant and how much soil comes into play. So now that we've covered all the main factors that might dictate how often and how much water to give your plants, let's answer a couple of the common questions that a lot of you might have. Now, first things first, how to properly water your plants. There's technically no wrong way to do this, but there's definitely a right way, so we'll cover that. When you're properly watering your plant, you're making sure that you're evenly hitting all of the sides of it. That way, each part of the soil is retaining the same amount of moisture. For plants that are in pots with a drainage hole, it's almost impossible to overwater them because any excess moisture is draining out the bottom. Now, for plants that are in pots without a drainage hole, this is where you have to be extra mindful about the quantity of water that you're giving them. So you might only need to water it once every 1 to 2 weeks, but you want to be really mindful about how much you're giving it because any excess moisture isn't going to be able to escape out the bottom. So one of the things I often tell my clients is you want to find a watering can that's similar in size of volume to the pot that you're watering. So that's everything from A to Z on watering. To recap, you want to make sure you know what type of plant you have, and then you can do a little bit of digging to determine what type of watering schedule you want to put it on. Now, based on those general tips, you should have a better idea of whether or not you're over or under watering your plants. Thanks again for watching this episode of Green Thumb, and I hope all of your watering questions were answered today. Remember to subscribe to Well+Good, and if you have any more watering questions, feel free to reach out.